I'm Susan Nussbaum, and I've been in the disability rights movement for, well, 36 or more years. Well, my earliest experiences trying to navigate, to move around in my wheelchair outdoors, well, I would end up peeing all over the city because there were no bathrooms that were accessible. I would look for sidewalks that were all crumbled up and ruined because those were the only ones that I could either, get down off of the sidewalk or up onto, because there were no curb cuts. I had to take an ambulance to my job. An ambulance. I bet it was $100 a ride. And they'd be transporting 3 or 4 people at a time, and it didn't matter where these people lived or how far apart, and the rides would turn out to be so long. There were nights when I didn't get home for a couple hours, at least. There was this forced segregation that occurred because there was no access to public transit, and all that time we were losing opportunities to take part in what was happening in the world. And it never occurred to us for a while that we could have this right. We had no idea at that time of our own power. We had sat in front of buses and blocked them on State Street, and we had chained ourselves to buses. We had made life miserable for so many people. So I was one of the 5 plaintiffs with disabilities who was involved in the first legal action for accessible public transit. Some of the stuff we won as a result of this lawsuit were that all of the buses would become lift equipped as they replaced them. And that was really huge for us. Our rights weren't always enforced, and buses would pass us by because they didn't feel like stopping and putting the lift down. And we had really shoddy lifts in those days. They were difficult, they broke easily, they weren't maintained, they weren't repaired. A lot of the drivers weren't trained properly in using them, and the trains were not being made accessible in a very timely manner. So about 20 years later, a bunch of disabled people and Equipped for Equality and Access Living prepared and worked and fought in court for these rights. The changes that we were able to get, the upgrades in service, are so thorough, so remarkable. Younger activists, they go to the bus, they go to the train with a sense of entitlement, which was certainly something I never had at the very beginning. I didn't think I deserved to have equal rights. It's terrible that I would think that, because usually I'm a very pushy person. Without our lawyers at Equipped for Equality, we wouldn't have been able to take the stage 2 of this whole transportation thing as far as we did.